Wyatt landed on the ground with a resounding thud, his face pressed against the mat while he heaved for breath. Above him, Cynthia stood waiting for him to get to his feet. "Again," Cynthia said, her tone unflinching as always during their training sessions. The now heterochromatic-eyed pilot groaned as he obeyed the command of the blue-haired woman. Shaking his head, he adopted a low-guard stance with his fists in front of him. Cynthia raised an eyebrow in response. "Brute force has never worked before," she pointed out plainly. "I know," Wyatt replied, and a chuckle caught his attention. Peering to the right, he found none other than Nultar Olkara as he wiped the sweat from his brow. He gave him a friendly wave as he watched from a safe distance what had become a regular scene for anyone visiting the gymnasium to admire. Namely speaking, watch Cynthia Winfield beat him down relentlessly over and over again. Though, as much as it pained him to admit, he could now see a purpose to the torture she called a training. They had just left Finnegan territory after 2 weeks of silent, rapid travel. The Nornavio showcased her speed, cutting off several days now that she was alone. Over the course of those 2 weeks, he had come back to his routine, and while his squad mates were surprised by his new eye colors, it didn't cause any altercations. In a rather odd turn of events, thanks to the events during the procession and the following banquet, he started to pay more attention to his surroundings. He caught things he had never bothered to pick up on before, mostly coming from noble women regardless of their rank and station. There were furtive glances thrown his way, whispers followed by sly, predatory smirks. The way they would sway their hips as they sauntered whenever he was close. The necessary adjust to their uniforms, especially across their most prominent feminine features. All in an attempt to gain his attention somehow. Romantic and sexual relationships were never something he craved, much less found interest in. But he'd be lying if he didn't find the sudden attention thrown his way somewhat jarring, and the appeal was, well, hard to ignore. But much like the red-dressed woman at the banquet, he knew their intentions were selfish and catered to their own interests, so he paid them no more attention than a single glance. Apparently, rumors spread about his uninterest, and some noblemen flexed their muscles in the gymnasium or gave him similar furtive glances. He wouldn't judge anyone for their sexual attraction, but he was attracted to women, not men. Thus, he made his best attempt to ignore those noblemen completely. Lastly, some commoner staff women had also tried to entice him with far less success than the noble women. It had been just 2 weeks so far of dealing with that particular problem, and he was already tired of it. But despite their best distant, non-verbal efforts, not a single one had approached him with words. Which was odd, to say the least. He could understand the commoners since he was sure they were afraid of him, but the noble women? Either they were taking their time, measuring their possibilities, or something else was keeping them at bay. Whatever was the case, Wyatt couldn't be more thankful for it. Like a fool, he would have certainly fallen for one of their tricks and temptations without the advice from his friends and the experience gained. Taking a deep breath, he shoved those thoughts aside and focused on the task at hand. He relaxed his muscles before tensing them and relaxing them once more, enjoying the warmth it produced, before lunging forth. Readapting to his new strength had been an easy task after a couple of days of intense training. Cynthia even showed him some mercy by not engaging him in combat until he was in full control of his body. After that, their training resumed, and just like she'd promised, his training escalated with new exercises, even more merciless training combat, and worst of all, her guidance only came sporadically. With a heavy exhale, he lunged forth, trying to punch Cynthia's stomach. She easily dodged it, but he'd been expecting it. Before his momentum ended, he used his right talon as a pivot to deliver a spinning kick that Cynthia blocked with one hand. With his ankle firmly in her grasp, he flopped to the ground before she could do anything to him. Her eyes widened in surprise before he used his free leg to sweep at her legs. To his dismay, she merely jumped, evading his attempt. But instead of the expected pain that followed a failure, she let go of his ankle and took a step back, nodding in approval. "Good. That was good, Wyatt. You switched between styles quickly and unexpectedly. Against many other fighters, it would have worked. And that kick? You've adapted well to your implants and enhancements." Her praise ended, and a smirk replaced her otherwise serious and stern expression. "You didn't hold back." "You told me not to hold back," Wyatt replied as he stood up. Remember that if you're ever faced against women in a real fight, you can't hold back, Wyatt, Cynthia pressed on. Why would I hold back just because they're a woman? If they're my enemy, they're my enemy. Simple as, he replied in full honesty. It was true after all. If he was facing an enemy trying to kill him, he cared not if they were a man, a woman, or an alien. Pleased with his answer, Cynthia's smile widened slightly. Most excellent. Now prepare yourself, Wyatt, for I shall be the one coming at you next. Wyatt felt his entire body go rigid upon hearing those words. He took a solid defensive stance, crouching slightly with his right leg behind for extra support. Meanwhile, Cynthia didn't bother to take any stance at all. She only hopped 3 times and cracked her neck. The sound made every bystander wince. They shared gazes for what felt like an eternity until Wyatt, sweating nervously and with a dry throat, nodded. In the blink of an eye, Cynthia, who was at least 3 meters apart, closed the distance before he could react to her. Instinctively, Wyatt threw an uppercut that the blue-haired woman dodged with casual ease. A moment later, a fist collided with his stomach, dropping him to his knees as he embraced his stomach in pain. Looking up at the red-armored woman, he was met with another approving nod. That will do for today, Wyatt. Refresh yourself and then go to Milkady's. He'll be waiting for you in the firing range. Tomorrow I shall find out how good you can be with a sword, Cynthia commanded before walking past him. Wyatt remained in his spot as breathing proved to be a monumental task at the moment. A few seconds later, a hand landed on his right shoulder. He turned to find Noltar offering him a helping hand. Taking it, his squadmate helped him stand up on shaky legs. You okay there, Wyatt? The slightly green-haired man asked with a mix of worry and amusement. I'll be, Wyatt replied, coughing at the end. The floor has become my most intimate relationship, wouldn't you agree? Noltar chuckled. Maybe so. Come, Lieutenant, how about I escort you to your quarters? That would be welcomed. Lady Cynthia has been rather energetic as of late. That is to say, she's not showing me any mercy whatsoever. I wonder how long it'll take before she breaks a bone, he thought to himself as he began to walk next to Noltar, albeit with some difficulty as the disorientation and pain were still running rampant in his body. Once they were out of the gymnasium and walking through the mostly empty hallways, Noltar cleared his throat. Has she broken anything yet? Noltar asked, unknowingly mirroring Wyatt's thoughts. Not yet, Wyatt replied. That punch looked like it hurt, Noltar pointed out with a chuckle. She was so fast. I still can't believe a human can move that quickly despite seeing it with my own eyes. Or should I say that I didn't see her move? One moment she was there, the next she had her fist in your stomach. I know what you mean, Noltar. I barely had time to react after she moved, Wyatt said, hiding the thrilling fear and respect he felt for Cynthia at that moment. Yeah, and I fear that she wasn't even serious about it. Regardless, you are incredibly fortunate. A bloody Winfield is training you. My great-grandfather received training from a Winfield, and in his diary, he always mentioned that what he learned from that training saved his life many times. He showed nothing but respect toward them. I can see why. She's not only beautiful, but dangerous, too. She wouldn't be a Winfield otherwise, huh? Wyatt turned his gaze to the grinning man and raised an eyebrow. You seem to know much about House Winfield, Noltar. The gray-eyed pilot shrugged. Not really. I only know them through memoirs, historical records, reputation, and sheer proximity. House Okara was a banner house under the rule of House Calidor, same as House Reed. We bordered the territory of House Winfield, so their exploits reached us fairly quickly. I remember now, you showed particular distaste toward House Reed. If you don't mind me asking, how did your family die? Wyatt asked in an understanding, cordial tone. Who said anything about my family being dead? Noltar chuckled somberly. Although that's a gentler fate than what we are going through. Oh, I see. Please forgive me, Noltar. I simply assumed your family was killed or something of the like. The black-haired pilot apologized. Noltar shrugged again. You didn't know. Can't say I can blame you for that, Lieutenant. Though, if I may ask, why did you assume that was the case as your first choice? Noble houses in Volantis have fights all the time. All of the smaller houses are bidding for power and the attention of House Arante, who, in turn, would do almost anything to please House Gimor and keep their position as the governing house of Volantis. Assassinations are rare, but do happen every so often, Wyatt explained. I always heard that things were rough on the more underdeveloped systems and planets, but nothing quite like that, said Nultar. I was born on Jissi. The conflict between noble houses there deals more with honor, standing, and reputation. Same could be said across the entirety of Kalidor territory. He paused, his gaze set to nothing for a second or two before he shrugged. Not that it matters anymore. Not me, at least. He's a fallen noble now, I remember. That does explain his reckless behavior during our training sessions and his near-suicidal approach to danger, Wyatt thought grimly. He never paid it much attention, but according to the gossip back at the academy, the worst fate a noble could suffer was to be exiled. But for a whole house, becoming a fallen house was a death sentence in all but name. Is that why you joined the Royal Navy? To seek out a life for yourself? Wyatt asked. Partially. I was originally going to join the Marines, but the fall of my house ended such prospects. Fortunately for me, being a pilot suited me just fine, Nultar replied, his usual laid-back, cheerful tone replaced by an air of somber resignation. What is it like, Nultar? To fall? Now that I'm a noble with a nascent house, there are many things I should start to worry about. Lady Cynthia and Princess Clara have been giving me small pointers and lessons, but a more grounded opinion would suit me well, Wyatt asked, not wanting to sound insulting or give Nultar the idea that he wanted to learn from his misfortune alone. You have a way with words, Lieutenant. Has anyone ever told you that? Nultar replied with a soft, empty chuckle. The downfall of House Olkara was orchestrated by House Reed. I've made no attempts to hide my distaste for that accursed name. He paused for a moment before offering his squad leader a polite, sincere smile. That reminds me, Lieutenant. I think my eyes have been playing tricks on me, but I swear I've seen Salazar Reed a couple of times in passing. Do you know anything about it? That is, if you can tell me at all. Wyatt pondered for a moment before answering. First tell me what House Reed did to yours, and I'll consider telling you. Of course, he planned on telling him regardless. The situation wasn't the same, but he could sympathize to an extent with his most veteran squad mate. There's nothing much to tell, Lieutenant. Despite our houses sharing a minor house status, House Reed is far more powerful, wealthy, and influential. House Olkara made the grave mistake of overreaching, and an immensely lucrative business deal carried by my father took a significant amount of credits away from Reed coffers, moving them to our own. House Reed took it as an insult, and they began to move against us. This all happened when I was just a child. By the time they were done with us, every commercial deal and position of importance we had was taken away from us in disgrace and shame. As a result, every partner and loyal friend we had abandoned us. We were no longer invited to events, parties, or meetings. We were made to be pariahs. And by the time I entered the academy, House Olkara had fallen, Nultar explained with a neutral, detached tone. Don't misunderstand me, though, Wyatt. My family is hardly struggling. We have credits, lands, and properties. But being cut off from social gatherings of importance and blocked from making worthwhile, significant deals, be they industrial, agricultural, social, commercial, or whatever else, is a death sentence. House Olkara will continue to exist for a generation or two more, maybe 3. But not a single proposal of marriage or union will come our way, nor will it be accepted. House Olkara is dead, and only something extraordinary could undo the damage House Reed did to us, Nultar said sternly. Do you hate House Reed? Wyatt asked, now understanding Nultar's fatalistic tendencies. Of course I do, but not for the reason you may think, Nultar replied. My father snubbed them badly. He deserved to be humbled, but said humbling affected our entire house. We paid for that insult 1,000-fold. House Reed wasn't content with just making us lose the same amount of credits my father took from them. We lost our reputation, made to look like incompetent fools, cheats, and dishonest backstabbers in broad daylight. No, they were in their right to act against my entire family and house. It is the disproportionate response for which I hate them. If a Reed dies, I won't shed any tears. If they suffer, I will laugh. I have nothing left to lose as it is. I see. Thank you, Nultar. Now, would you like to know why Salazar is here? Wyatt asked with a mischievous smirk. Just like that, the melancholic aura surrounding Nultar evaporated and his smile returned. By the time they reached his quarters, Wyatt finished his tale, from Salazar's attempt to humiliate him in front of everyone, the duel, the result of said duel, to which Nultar laughed for an entire minute until he cried, and then his punishment. That caused Nultar to nearly fall to the ground, clutching his stomach due to how hard he was laughing. His laughter was infectious, though Wyatt lacked the same enjoyment Nultar was experiencing. Pleasantries were exchanged, and soon after Nultar left, making his way to the joint noble crew barracks to tend to his necessities. After a quick shower, Wyatt put on a fresh uniform when he heard the voice of Clara in his mind. "Wyatt, your training with Milcades has been postponed. I need you on the bridge as fast as you can," ordered the princess. Instantly, he left his quarters and made his way to the bridge, wondering what had happened. When he reached the bridge's doors guarded by 2 Royal Marines, the duo let him pass without question and entered the familiar room. Commander Redford stood next to the captain's chair with Cynthia and Captain Milcades also present. He recognized Galt Tirome sitting on one of the stations, and the rest of the bridge crew were busy carrying out their duties. Clara sat on the captain's chair, wearing not her armor but rather something he'd never seen her wear before. A mix between a uniform colored in hues of purple, blue, and black and a pilot's armor. It lacked the reinforced armor but offered more mobility in return, though he suspected she was wearing more for comfort than for style. Nevertheless, the screen hanging from the ceiling caught his attention the most. On it, the image of what could charitably be called a ship was on screen, floating in space trapped in the orbit of a small, rocky planetoid. He stepped closer to Clara, joining Cynthia, Milcades, and Redford, breaking the silence. "As you've requested, I'm here, my princess. If I may ask, what kind of ship is that?" "According to the readings, that's an old freighter retrofitted to serve as a live ship of sorts," Redford answered, his eyes never leaving the monitor. "It has 4 standard laser turrets, 2 anti-asteroid cannons, and 6 PD turrets. Better armed than regular freighters. The heat signatures indicate that the ship is powered, but its reactor is at minimum capacity." Wyatt didn't need more information to arrive at the conclusion everyone else had already achieved. He was looking at a pirate vessel. "Galt?" Clara asked, her tone firm. "Processing the information, my princess. We're not picking any signals coming from or being received by the ship. They're completely silent," Galt replied. "So they're not acting as a relay station or planning to make an assault? Relevant information about the system?" Clara asked, eyes narrowing. "Aside from mining operations on the asteroid belts, the icy planets with their water harvesting, and the helium harvester on the system's single-gas giant, nothing of worth can be found here, my princess," replied the red-haired man a second later. "If I may be so bold to say, perhaps these pirates are performing repairs?" "I agree with his observation, my princess. A lone pirate ship wouldn't be able to do much on its own even here," Redford added. "Unless, of course, this pirate scum is desperate enough to strike by its lonesome." "The question remains, what are we to do with it?" Clara said, ending with a deep hum. "I need your opinions on what is to be done. Redford?" "Destroy them. Let it stain the principality no longer," came the veteran's reply, short but brutal. "Cynthia?" "Capture their leader. Find out what he knows." A simple reply, and to the point, was ushered by the blue-haired woman, "Captain Milcades?" "We should send a boarding team, my princess. We must know why they are here and their intentions. For all we know, this could be the staging point for an assault by a large pirate group or, worse, an entire syndicate." The stoic, cold, and firm voice of Captain Milcades came next. "Wyatt?" Wyatt was taken aback for a moment at the mention of his name, but the surprise passed quickly as he gave his answer, short and decisive. "Blow them up." "Galt? My princess?" Galt asked, confused and surprised at the mention of his name. "I have no right to give you any sort of advice, my princess." "Save your delusional pleasantries, Galt. Your princess and captain has requested your input. Now give it to me. Your prior experience dealing with pirates may prove useful," Clara ordered, without even looking at the red-haired man. The entire bridge felt tense for a few seconds until Galt swallowed and gave his answer. "We have the element of surprise, my princess. Destroying them would be as easy as deploying a boarding action. Boarding them to learn their intentions sounds to be the more reasonable option." Clara didn't say anything for what felt like ages after Galt gave his input. Finally, she spoke with a heavy, commanding tone that made everyone understand her orders would be carried out without fail. "Board the ship. Capture their leaders alive and unharmed. Wyatt, I want your squadron to move in and plant a haywire mine to disable them. Captain Milcades, I need you and 2 other Royal Marines to oversee and command our boarding forces. I'll dispatch Francesco Arcadi and some of his forces as well." "Understood, my princess," Milcades replied, turning to leave and carry out his orders without question. "As you command, my princess," Wyatt said shortly after. "Are we to join the boarding forces?" "No. After you disable the ship, I want you and your squadron to remain vigilant and explore the planetoid's surface in search of a base of operations," Clara replied in that same tone. "My princess," Wyatt repeated, and gave a salute before leaving to carry out his orders. Unless the pirates were somehow preparing a trap, he wouldn't see any real combat at all. That suited him just fine. Pirate Retrofitted Freighter. Milcades, Royal Marine Captain, watched through a live video feed as the pirate freighter lost the few lights it had across its hull as the haywire mine did its work. It had been decided that the boarding parties wouldn't use their precious few boarding pods. They could repair them thanks to the abundance of supplies and the fabricator the Noir Navio was equipped with. But Princess Clara decided that they would instead use shuttles and board the ship through its cargo bays. With any luck, the sudden loss of power would indicate the pirates to suit up as a boarding action was likely to happen soon. That meant more prisoners to interrogate. If not, no one would miss a pirate. In his visor's tactical feed, he watched Wyatt Staples' squadron, the Composters, move away from the vessel and down to the planetoid looking for a hidden pirate base. Meanwhile, the 3 shuttles carrying several Marines and their auxilia forces, plus the mercenaries, moved as one quickly through space, approaching the now crippled freighter. The shuttles decelerated and landed on the freighter's hull after a few minutes. The doors opened and the boarding forces moved out carefully, their magnetic boots keeping them grounded to the ship's hull. Their targeted cargo bay was punctured by a hull-cutting laser drone. A 5-meter diameter metal circle was launched into space, followed by the trapped atmosphere inside the cargo bay, expelling trash and boxes into open space, but no bodies. When the flow finally stopped, he and his 2 fellow Royal Marines were the first to invade the pirate vessel, weapons at the ready. To his surprise, the cargo bay was devoid of people. "Move in," he ordered at the same time he and his companions rushed to where the bridge was located, hoping to capture the pirate leader there. Behind him, several dozen auxilia forces entered the ship first, then followed by their Marine leaders. The mercenaries, led by their self-proclaimed commander Francesco Arcadi, also followed suit and moved to carry out their orders, heading in the opposite direction. The gaping entry hole was quickly sealed by auxilia forces using sealing foam moments before doors were breached and pressurization occurred. Once it stopped, Milcades continued on his way and did not take long to find the first signs of resistance. Measuring his enemy took only a moment, and he felt disgust toward them. Calling their equipment lackluster would be generous. Most of it was patched, refitted, and repaired so many times it was a wonder it still worked at all. And their weaponry? Even by pirate standards, they were little more than glorified, poorly patched-together stolen weapons that would jam half the time. However, what truly disgusted him was that the pirates he was facing couldn't be past 16. Were their superiors so cowardly that they would their young first? The pirates opened fire, but most of their weapons either stopped working after a few shots or they ran out of ammunition after just a few seconds of sustained fire. Following his orders, instead of killing them, he knocked them out just so he could interrogate them later. His companions followed suit, unharmed. As they moved towards the bridge, the same scene repeated itself over and over, with adolescents, most of them barely 16 or 15 years old, being the bulk of the stubborn defenders trying to get them off their rusty, barely functional ship. Few were those past 18, and fewer still were the odd kids no older than 12 joining the defenders. After the 6th encounter, and now ready to storm the bridge, Milcades knew something was terribly wrong with the ship. With a low-yield breaching charge, the worn bulkhead keeping the bridge locked away was destroyed. Milcades moved in expecting to be immediately shot at, but instead found a trio of adults protecting. "Captain Milcades, we have a bit of a situation here," came the voice of Francesco, gruff and with a notable bass to it. "I'm aware. We've captured the bridge. Do not kill the prisoners if you can. Secure the rest of the vessel," Milcades ordered through his comms before addressing the group of pirates in front of him. "Surrender!" With no other options at their disposal, the three leaders kneeled and put their hands behind their heads. His princess would have many questions, he was certain of it.